Alright, so today we're picking up with who are the Nazis? What is the Nazi Party all about? Well, their roots begin in World War I. What they saw in World War I was that those with the totalitarian governments were the winning governments during the wars, the ones that were very, very powerful governments. Not necessarily that they had total control over their people, but they were the powerful governments. And so that's what they're going to see. They also are going to notice that when the Germans expanded during World War I, a lot of times they were welcomed into places, especially in Russia, that as the Germans expanded into Russia when they started to fight Russia, that the Russian Jews are going to welcome in the Germans during World War I because they were seen as the better alternative to the Russian government, because the Russian government tended to be very harsh on the Jews, and you would have pogroms, and pogroms were like little beatings where they would beat up people for no reason just because they were Jewish. Also during that time period, the Armenian massacre will take place, and these were approximately 1 million people who died or were killed by the Turks during World War I. The Turks took the opportunity of World War I to get rid of sort of a problem population within their country. And so they get rid of these Armenians. Now, Hitler's going to read about this in the newspapers, and he's going to realize that, hey, in a time of war, you can kill off an entire people and get away with it. Because after World War I, nothing happened to the Turks. Nobody said anything because nobody cared about the Armenians. Today, there's kind of more of an outcry about it, but at the time, nobody was mentioning that this was a problem at all. And Hitler's going to take this as a lesson. He's going to say that, you know what, you pick the right people to get rid of, and you can do it. The Versailles Peace Treaty is also going to be a part of why the Nazis developed. In 1919, remember the Versailles Peace Treaty had a lot of things that were going on with it that the Germans did not like. Like they had war reparations. They had to pay back $33 billion. They had to reduce their army to 100,000, the smallest in Europe at the time. They also had to sign the war guilt clause, saying that they alone were guilty of starting the war when, if you remember from class, they were not. They were like 3 or 4 steps down the road. And then they also had to give up the Rhineland, which was an industrial area for them, something that could have helped them to get through things like the Great Depression and from the high unemployment and inflation that followed World War I for them. Also, after World War I, there's a lot of weakness among the nations. Everybody is weak with the exception of perhaps the United States. And there's no money, there's no people because of reduction of the population due to the influenza that comes around in 1918, because of war, all kinds of stuff. There's no work. So there's kind of this weakness among the nations, and that's going to allow for an opportunity for the Nazi Party to come to power. And then finally you have the Weimar Republic. And the Weimar Republic was that new German government that came about because Wilson refused to negotiate with the Germans unless they had a democratic or republic government. And remember, it is not well liked because this is the government who signed the peace treaty that had all those problems in it, and they were forced to sign it. And so they're not well liked. They're seen as being the traitors to the German people. So what is Hitler doing between the wars? Well, in the 1920s, he's working on the development of the Nazi Party. He is working on getting membership and getting it some prestige and all kinds of stuff, getting it organized. Well, in November of 1923, he takes part in an operation called the Beer Hall Putsch. And the Beer Hall Putsch basically was this plan for Hitler and several others to kidnap the German government officials and make them sign control over to Hitler. Now this plan fails miserably, and Hitler's going to be sent to prison, and he's sentenced to 5 years, and he serves only 5 months. And the reason for that is because the jury is very sympathetic to Hitler's cause. Yes, he committed a crime, but it's a crime that they also would have liked to commit and get rid of the government, and so they let him off easy. So he could have been in jail for 5 years and maybe never have been a problem for us, but they let him out after only 5 months. But like I said in the previous lesson, that while he's in prison, that's where he kind of finds his calling. He becomes a modern politician during those 5 months. He writes his book, Mein Kampf, And the government's going to see a very slow growth for the Nazis as a party, but they also see a very rapid decline of moderates, people who were okay with the democratic government, or who were trying to work with the democratic government. And so while the Nazis aren't like exploding in population, they are gaining small footholds here and there, while the moderates are losing left and right. Well, then the Great Depression hits, and when the Depression hits, that's when the Nazi Party is going to change its focus from communists and socialists to their new scapegoats, which are going to be the Jews. They're also going to include the communists in there too, but their main focus now is going to be the Jewish population. During the Great Depression, 6 million Germans are unemployed, and so that is a huge, huge number. And for the Nazi Party, they say, well, the solution to this unemployment is to get rid of the problem. And the problem is the Jews, because they're the ones who are supporting a capitalist system, which is keeping you out of a job, basically. Hitler finally gains complete control of the Nazi Party. In the early days, he was not the leader. He was one of many leaders. But throughout this time period, he starts gaining more and more control, and eventually he gains complete control of the Nazi Party. He becomes the leader. And he's going to be able to get rid of the Weimar Republic, and we're going to talk about that. And he keeps President Hindenburg, though. So he gets rid of the Republic government, but he's going to keep President Hindenburg. Basically, so it looks legitimate, like he's gaining power, but he's doing it with the blessing of the democratic government, sort of thing. Well, Hitler eventually, and the Nazi Party, will eventually want to establish the Third Reich. And the Third Reich is the Third German Empire. The first one was under the Roman Empire, when the German people finally started coming together. The second one was in the 19th century under Emperor Bismarck. And the Third Reich, according to Hitler, would last for 1,000 years. He was a little off his mark. But Hitler's rise to power starts in January of 1933. In January of 1933, he is named Chancellor by the Democratic government. They decide to make him Chancellor, just like Mussolini was made Premier, because again, it was a way to appease the Nazi Party without actually confronting them. And so the same thing's going to happen for Hitler. They're going to make him Chancellor, and that gives him a very limited amount of power. But within a month, he's kind of unhappy with his job. So by February of 1933, things are going to start moving. And we see the Reichstag, which is the parliament building in Germany. The Reichstag is going to catch fire, and it's blamed on the communists. Now today, there's some evidence that actually the Nazis were the ones who started the fire, so that they could blame it on the communists, so that they could then bring about the Emergency Powers Act. And the Emergency Powers Act was something thought up by Hitler, who said that this would give him the control of the police force. Remember, as Chancellor, he had a limited amount of power. Well, he says, with the Emergency Powers Act, I need to have a little bit more power so I can, control things and keep us safe and that kind of stuff. So it gives the police a lot of power. It gives them the power to search and siege without a warrant, so violating some democratic principles. But it gives Hitler more and more power, more control. So that the next month, because again, he gets kind of frustrated that he doesn't have enough power. So by March of 1933, he is going to put forth to the Parliament the Enabling Act. And basically, the Enabling Act is going to enable Hitler to gain more power. It is going to suspend the German Constitution for a period of 4 years, giving that power to Hitler so that he would have it for that 4 years in order to fix the country and fix the economy, and then after 4 years he's going to give power back. It's a legal assumption of power. Hitler never comes in and kills off everybody and then takes power. They willingly give it to him. They're the idiots for saying that you only have 4 years without realizing that after 4 years Hitler's going to say, I ain't giving anything back. I don't know what you're talking about. So they give it to him. He gets the power legally. And remember, he keeps on President Hindenburg because he wants it to seem legal. He wants it to seem legitimate. Because if it doesn't, who's going to be breathing down their necks? Well, most likely the United States, Great Britain, and France. And as long as he keeps it seeming legal, they're not going to do that, because it seems like it's okay with the democratic government that he's in power. Well, eventually, now that he has power, he's going to have a series of purges. He's going to get people who don't follow Nazism out of government jobs and replace them with Nazis. By August of 1934, President Hindenburg is going to die, and that leaves the only one in charge is Hitler, and he has complete control. So now his main focus between 1933 and 36 is consolidating power over the Aryans, or over the German population, the good Germans, according to him, the Aryans. So what he's going to do, number one, is he's going to focus on this new nationalism. Remember, nationalism is a focus on your country, wanting it to do well, wanting it to be better. And so he's going to change it from German nationalism to Aryan nationalism, that you needed to be blonde, blue-eyed, and fair-skinned. You have to show that your background, you are a true German citizen, all that kind of stuff. And if you were not Aryan, you're not a citizen. So people who came from other countries and were living in Germany and didn't have the background to prove it or prove their lineage, they're not citizens. They're not going to be considered citizens. But it's a change in mentality for the German population. The second thing he's going to do is he's going to have a lot of public demonstrations. Like I said, Hitler's a very, very good speaker. And so he's going to take every opportunity he can to get in front of people and to motivate them and get them going. And so he turns his speeches into these carnival-like events where he makes it fun. There's free food, there's entertainment. In some cases, it's almost like a religious ceremony because there's a lot of pomp and circumstance kind of stuff. And so it's very entertaining. People love to come see him because they don't know what's going to be there. It's going to be like a holiday kind of thing. The third thing he's going to do is focus on the economy. Remember, that's one of the things that he had to fix in his 4 years. And so he's going to rearm. And by rearming the military, he is going to end unemployment because he's creating jobs. Remember, they were reduced down to 100,000. Very small. And so he's going to make it the biggest, which means there's a lot of crap that needs to be made. A lot of jobs available. And so he's going to build up the military, and this creates jobs. And it's so effective because in 1933, there were 6 million unemployed Germans. And 3 years later, in 1936, there were 2.5 million. He had reduced it by half. And by 1938, just 2 years after that, it was down to 500,000. Tremendous amount of change for the Germans. He is delivering on his promises of fixing things. FDR was not able to do that. Great Britain and France aren't able to do that. And here's Germany fixing things, giving people work, getting them money so that they can survive through the Great Depression. And so he's very successful at that. Who's not going to like a guy who's giving you a job? Okay? The fourth thing is that he's going to do what's called time control. It's kind of like mind control, basically giving you no time to think or to really question what's happening. Basically, if you're not at work, the government's going to pay for your vacation to give you time off. And so lots of things to do at little or no cost, travel and entertainment, so that you can take a holiday, and the government's going to help you with that. And sometimes it might be free, but sometimes it might just cost a little bit. And so, again, who's not going to like a government that's giving you those things? That's going to be awesome. The fifth thing is that he's going to focus a lot of time and attention on the youth of Germany. He saw the importance of youth in Germany, and so he focuses a lot of time and attention on schools and churches, which are now going to teach Nazism. In fact, 30% of Nazis are going to be under the age of 25, very young population. So that is a huge, huge impact because he's planning for the future. It's not just going to be for 4 years. It's going to be for 1,000, just like he was planning. So he's focusing on those youth, the ones that are going to carry it forth. And the sixth thing is he's going to focus on coercion and the first concentration camps, because basically coercion means that you're going to force somebody to change their mind. And the first concentration camps that he creates are not for Jews. They are not Jewish concentration camps. Those won't come until much later. The very first concentration camps were for political prisoners, people who opposed him and who he's going to, through coercion, get them to change their mind, and suddenly they are pro-Nazi. So, they were taken to prison, and then someone talks to you in order to make you change your mind, and then you sign a waiver saying that now I'm a supporter, and then you're let free to go back to your family. But he's building up that support either through fear or through true people believing in him. So, Hitler's European War will begin in 1936, much earlier than we get into the war, much earlier than the U.S. gets in. But the European War for Hitler begins in 1936. Remember, in his book, he talked about having living space for the German people. It's called Lebensraum, and Lebensraum is living space for German-speaking people, that they were bursting at the seams. They need more room in order to be able to continue as a people. And so in March of 1936, he is going to go into the Rhineland, that area that had been taken away from them as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. And that area, that tiny area, which had a lot of German-speaking people in it, is going to be occupied by the German army. And nobody does anything. The French are a little unhappy about it because they're being kicked out of it. But nobody does anything. Nobody says, no, you can't do that, that you're violating treaty, that kind of stuff. Nobody does anything. And so Hitler bides his time. He's like, okay, I did this one little step. Let's just sit and wait for a little while. Let's see what happens. And so he doesn't make his next move until March of 1938, 2 years later. And at that point, he declares an Anschluss, or union, with Austria. Basically, he's annexing Austria and taking it in as a part of German territory. He's doing this in order to preserve order and to reunite Austria with Germany, because there were a lot of German-speaking Austrians living in Austria. And so he's reuniting the German-speaking people. Now, most Austrians are going to welcome Hitler's army into Austria. Not all, but most of them do. And again, nobody does anything. It's just like with the Rhineland. And for most historians, they basically believe that it's because both Austria and the Rhineland had such a high concentration of German minorities that that's why nobody decided to step in at that time. So this is when Hitler begins to move his pace a little bit faster. And so October of 1938, he's going to take the Sudetenland. Now, the Sudetenland was this area surrounding Czechoslovakia, and it kind of cut into Germany. It looked like, as Hitler put it, it looked like a dagger into the heart of the German people. And so the Czechs aren't very happy about it because he's taking their territory. So the Czechs are going to ask Great Britain and France for help. And so Great Britain and France are like, well, we can sit down and discuss things with this Hitler guy and figure out what we can do. And so they send the British Prime Minister, Chamberlain, and France's representative, Daladier. And they're going to meet with Hitler at Munich in Germany in order to settle this argument. And I don't know if you noticed, but there's no Czech representative there. It's just Hitler and Chamberlain and Daladier. There is no Czech representative whatsoever. Okay, so obviously they're not really going to be kind of a focus of this. And so what these three come up with is something called the Munich Pact. And the Munich Pact, basically, the British and the French say, okay, Germany, you can have the Sudetenland. It's just the Czechs. It's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll handle it. Because Hitler, like I said, very, very powerful speaker, he is going to call it the dagger in the heart of the German people. And he promises that this is going to be his last territorial demand. He doesn't want any more land after this. This is it. That's all he wants. And once he's done, he's happy. And Chamberlain and Daladier believe him. Because they're idiots, I guess. But they just believe him. And so Germany gains this good farmland. They gain a lot more Germans. But what it does is it begins this policy of appeasement, that we're going to give up our principles of we're going to abandon people we like in order to pacify the people we don't like so they don't fight us. We don't want to go into a war. So it's a huge setback. Well, the German offensive begins March of 1939. Germany takes the rest of Czechoslovakia. So much for the last territorial demand. They go in and take the rest of it. Well, in that same year, Hitler is going to meet with Stalin, and they're going to sign the Hitler-Stalin Pact. And this is a non-aggression pact between Germany and the Soviet Union, saying that they're not going to attack each other. Now, this is kind of a very interesting thing because these two guys hate each other. Remember, Hitler's a fascist. He's a Nazi. They hate communists. And Stalin is a communist. Yet they're agreeing to not fight each other. And when they sign this pact, they're also making an agreement that they will also split the country of Poland between them when Hitler invades it later this year, later in 1939. And so Hitler's not stupid. He's doing this for a reason. He learned his lesson from World War I. Because what happened in World War I? Germany had to fight a two-front war. They were fighting against France and Great Britain on the Western Front. They were fighting against Soviet Union, or Russia at the time, on the Eastern Front. And that made their army weaker. So what Hitler's doing is he's saying, if I can make sure the Soviets stay out of it, I can go take whatever I want. Because I'm going to have the most powerful military. I'm going to have the best chance. So he's getting rid of one enemy by signing this pact. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. And that's going to be the official start to World War II. Because the Poles, kind of knowing what was going on, ask Great Britain and France to help them if Germany ever does attack. And Great Britain and France say, sure, we'll help you out if they ever attack. Because they really didn't think that he was going to, because he had said that that was his last territorial demand. Well, Germany invades Poland, which normally would be seen as an act of war, right? But they claim that the Poles attacked the Germans first, that they had crossed into German territory, and they were just retaliating. They were just protecting themselves, which was really bogus. There's some evidence to suggest that the Germans had surreptitiously crossed the border, captured a bunch of Poles, and brought them back over the border with them to stage an attack. That really never took place. So that they could have a legitimate reason for going into Poland. But they're going to be utilizing this new military strategy called Blitzkrieg. And Blitzkrieg is lightning war. You strike hard, you strike fast, you take them by surprise. And you continue to wreak confusion and panic, and you use everything that you have. You attack anyone and anywhere. It's not just military targets. You're going to be attacking refugees on the road. You're attacking civilians. You're attacking cities. You're attacking the railroad. They're never supposed to know where you're going to be next. It keeps people on their toes. It keeps them freaked out of their minds. That's the whole purpose behind the Blitzkrieg. Well, the Polish army was really no contest. There was no match whatsoever. The Polish army was basically still stuck in World War I era, and the Germans had advanced their technology so far. The Polish army was very old-fashioned. They were taking out cavalry with horses against tanks that the Germans had, and so they were made fun of because of this. And this is going to give a lot of basis, or the origin of a lot of Polak jokes. And there's a pretty famous one from World War II where, what do you do when a Polak throws a grenade at you? Well, you pull the pin and you throw it back. So they obviously didn't know how to use their weapons very well. But it leads to a string of jokes about Polacks. Because the British and the French had agreed to help defend Poland, the British and the French are going to declare war on Germany on September 3rd. But the fighting is over in 3 weeks in Poland. They're defeated in just 3 weeks, and that's before the British and the French can even mobilize and get there to help them out. And so the Soviets and the Germans split the territory just like they agreed, and the Polish government goes into exile. They go into France, and they are in exile in Paris. Now, the winter of 1939 and 1940 comes about, and everyone's expecting Hitler to do something. They're waiting for the next attack. They don't know where it's coming, but they assume it's going to be France. And it's called a Sitzkrieg because it becomes a sitting war. The press called it a phony war because Hitler's doing nothing, so they're figuring, oh, he must be done, that we're all done. We don't have to go to war or anything like that. There's no fighting on either side. Yet tensions are rising along the Maginot Line. And the Maginot Line is this line of fortifications that were built by the French on the border between France and Germany. They were very worried about them coming over. And the purpose was to prevent another German invasion. And so they created this series of underground forts and tunnels and locations and stuff. But the problem is that it was built to combat World War I technology. And war technology had advanced much further beyond World War I technology. And so you're going to see a video on it, but there's really no contest. But like I said, Germany is doing nothing during the winter, and so you have these French soldiers sitting at the Maginot Line wondering, okay, they're going to attack today, and then they don't. Okay, they're going to attack today, and then they don't. And it's just like they're getting so tense. They're just like on the edge of their seat. But Hitler's in no hurry. He knows he has the advantage. He wants good weather. He doesn't want to fight in the wintertime. That's a stupid idea. And he wants good planning. So he's going to allow his generals to have time to plan the best attack that they can. And we're going to see what happens in the spring of 1940.